Good evening, and welcome into another episode of Gridiron Eve. He's Mike Huseman. I'm John Bogle, and what's going on this week, Mike? We got week 13 already upon us.
We do. Rivalry week, as many have called it, even though I feel like with some of the conferences we've already seen a lot of their rivalries take place, but this is always a big weekend and a fun one to watch. So I'm excited for it, just like you are, I'm sure. Yeah.
It's a bittersweet week, right? Because it's marking the end of the regular season of college football, which means we've already gone through a season.
Yeah. But we still got, conference title week, lots of bowl games spread out, and I guess the one off of Army Navy, which I think is the only game that weekend. So,
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And the uniforms are already out for both of those teams. They look awesome. They look sick.
They do. Yeah.
It's gonna be fun. Color on color this year. Yeah. Thank God.
Our Navy's is it like a navy blue?
It's like it's a very dark.
Okay.
Very dark blue, almost black for the submarines.
Oh, okay. I saw the Army ones. Yeah.
The Army ones look awesome.
Yeah, they do.
So it's they always do such a great job with the uniforms for that game, coming up with the designs and getting all that straight. So shout out to them. They always do a great job with all that.
For sure.
We can review. Mike, I hate to be the I'm not beating on my chest. I promise I'm not. But we got to bring this up again. Sorry, man.
No, I want to go over the games of the past weekend. We always do that. We had 4 challenges and you won all of them. I was on North Carolina plus 6.5. Clemson won that game by 11. They got the late picks to seal it. I was also on Miami plus 1.5 against Louisville. They lost by 7 in that one. Also, a late turnover did me in there. Texas Tech minus 3 against UCF. I was on, and while Texas Tech did win that game, it was only by 1 point. So UCF did cover that for you. And then I had the double challenge of Oregon State minus 2 against Washington, and they lost by 2. So it was a more frustrating week for me in some ways, because like a couple weeks ago, when you won the first double challenge with Florida and Tennessee and then dominated that week, most of those games were blowouts where it just everything got away from me. Where this one, they were all close games that just didn't go my way in the end. So that was, in some ways, it was more frustrating. But well played for you. And you have the 50-point lead now, which is showing on screen. Yeah. Oddly enough, I found it funny that...
and it was...
I was going to say, I found it funny that the margin you have now is the exact same that I won by last year. So we potentially could have the same margin of victory in both seasons.
So sometimes it bounces. And the funny thing is, I'm the type of guy that I look back at the, what I could have done better. And I missed an opportunity against FAU because you had FAU with the spread against Tulane. I agreed with you on that. And there was something that was deep down in me that I almost challenged that last week, but otherwise it would have been 30. But, it's just, that's what I guess I look at is I see the 25 points, but I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, I must be like a football player at this point. It must be all the coaching I'm doing here recently in high school. Yeah. I'm looking at it going, I could have been 30.
Yeah. The other 2 I found interesting were 2 of my games I picked that you didn't challenge were close spreads, but both ended up being blowouts, one of which I was right, one of which I was wrong. So I thought Colorado was going to cover against Wazoo. They just got rolled. But then I thought Arkansas State was going to cover against Texas State, and they won by like 50. So like I was totally wrong on one, totally right on the other in 2 close spreads. The other thing I thought was interesting, I was going to say, kind of shifting gears a little, moving forward to this week. You shared a tweet or a post, I should say, earlier this week about the Frank Broyles Award. Lots of interesting names on that list for this year. We have,
yes,
many top-notch assistant coach. So for those of you that don't know, that's the Assistant Coach of the Year award. And I just thought the chatter that people had going through that award, and like the people who made the semis, was very interesting. So you had made the case. Was Sharon Moore the guy that you kind of were on, or was it Phil Parker? I forget. Maybe I'm wrong.
Because it was more. I definitely.
It was more.
There are a few guys that I mentioned on the list.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was more.
Yep, and I'm kind of on the Ryan Grubb bandwagon with Washington, but lots of good names on that list. Phil Parker is kind of now being a perennial fixture on the list, D coordinator at Iowa. It was nice to see James Madison, Brian Haynes, their D coordinator, got some love. And Manny Diaz reappearing, former Miami head coach, is now at Penn State as the D coordinator. So we saw some, big. Tommy Rees is, I think he's a contender in a sense that, being new to his job, their first month of the year, like, they were kind of a disaster on offense. Now they look fantastic. He has clearly tailored the play calling in their offense to Jalen Milroe's strengths, and they're rolling right now. Like, I give Reese a lot of credit for that. And I think a lot.
That was the first name that I put on the list too, was because it's, and maybe it's because he was the first one that on the list, be sorted alphabetically by school.
Yeah.
But yeah, the season didn't go the way that they thought it was going to in the beginning. You take that tough loss to Texas at home, and then you're able to bounce back after a really poor showing against South Florida, and put up and get this offense rolling after that. I mean, granted, there's been a couple of hiccups. I think the Arkansas game, second half particularly, was a hiccup, but that's your typical Alabama, Saban using it to get the team whipped into shape. And they've been on a roll ever since then.
Yeah, they have. They have really looked
Another guy I really liked was Mike Bobo. Because that's similar to Reese, right? Because Georgia lost so much offensively, and Bobo had some huge shoes to fill in when Todd Monken came in. That offense has become just as potent as it was when Monken was there last year. So I give Bobo a lot of credit for that. Mention Moore just because he's coached several games for the Wolverines this year with the the multiple games that Jim Harbaugh's had to miss due to suspensions. The last guy I really liked on it was Will Steiner at Oregon. Again, Oregon offense has been rolling every game this year. There's not a game that you can go look at and say Oregon wasn't rolling offensively.
Yeah, he came over from UTSA. That's where he'd been the coordinator before. Yeah. The one guy, this is another plug, your 50-teamer fantasy roster, in fact, John, but a guy I was hoping would make the semifinal but didn't was Greg Gasparotto, the D coordinator at Troy. Their defense is unreal at the G5 level. They're just kicking ass. And I was hoping he didn't make it, but as a G5 guy, that's a tough list to crack. And I'm pretty sure Haynes from JMU is the only G5 guy that did make the list.
Yeah, that is the only one.
Yeah.
I was looking for a G5, and I was like, oh, yeah, James Madison, that's it.
Yeah.
And James Madison's defense has been right there, up there with Troy's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Outside of the Appalachian State game this year, that's the only game that you can really say, well, maybe the defense wasn't great, but they were still good in that game. It wasn't a bad performance. Yeah. So,
for sure.
Well, sweet, man. We ready to get into the rounds and get this thing rolling?
I am. Yeah, my first game. I'll just start it off. I got the Thanksgiving night game, Egg Bowl.
Ooh.
Yep. I don't think Mississippi State wins this one. I do think they cover it. However, they're going to be a team that hugely motivated. For them, this game gets them to bowl eligibility. And I did a lot of my picks based on motivations, potential letdowns this weekend, and trying to get that in the picture. But this Mississippi State team, Greg Knox took over. They got the win against Southern Miss last weekend. They are not throwing the ball well at all. Their pass D is okay. They're running the ball better lately. Early on, they weren't really doing anything great, but they've started to run the ball more. And I think this is one of those where they can scratch and claw and keep this within. So 10.5 is what I have here. That spread has actually jumped to like 13 since, but I got it at 10.5, and I think they keep it. If you're giving me a touchdown, a field goal, and a hook, I'm going to take them in this game, just because of that motivation factor and them looking better, and being able to play spoiler to some extent.
No, that makes sense. So, granted, Ole Miss came off that really disappointing game against Georgia.
Yeah.
I think I shouldn't say everybody, I didn't, because I took Georgia on that one. That was part of what allowed me to get ahead on the last couple weeks. But the offense that was so explosive all year long, when you really look at the last couple games, hasn't quite lived up to what we thought it was.
No.
That
Even
being
last week, they beat Louisiana Monroe 35-3. They did not play well in the first quarter. They started really slow.
No, they did. Yeah. And Mississippi State, on the other hand, offensively, their last 4 SEC games, they scored a total of, I'm adding the points up in my head,
I bet
33
it's not
points.
Okay. I was going to say, I bet it's less than 30. Okay, 33.
33 points in their last 4 games, 7 against Arkansas, 13 against Auburn, 3 against Kentucky, and 10 against A&M. There's not a lot that you can do to fix this offense at this point, I think. And granted that 41, good number to put up against Southern Mississippi, but they're not going to be bowl eligible this year. They're already eliminated.
I think, speaking of Southern Miss, I think Will Hall probably gets fired this Sunday.
Probably.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Now, the very interesting thing about this is that the underdog in this series is 8-2 against the spread in the last 10 games with 6 outright upsets.
Okay.
Mississippi State is 4-1 straight up and against the spread in the last 5 senior days they played, which, if you think about that, has been all against Ole Miss.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is the visitor is 6-2 straight up and 8-0 against the spread. So you got 2 conflicting shots here as Ole Miss is on the road. Just judge. I'm going to challenge this. I think Ole Miss blows them out.
Okay.
And I think this is where offense just kind of comes into play. There's going to be too much for Mississippi State to keep up with, and I think 2 touchdowns. I think there's a reason why the spread's moved. A lot of the sharps are on it. I'm on it too, and I like Mississippi State to win by probably at least 2 touchdowns. It might be 3.
Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And that was another kind of part of my motivation this week was picking games that hopefully will get challenged, just because I got to climb out of a hole. So I'm gonna try, but also I'm gonna try to be a little more, liberal with throwing out the challenges too. So
I thought it was interesting that you went SEC with your first pick because SEC did not work out for you too well a couple weeks ago.
I initially had that, like when I listed my picks, I had that one as last, but I moved it to first because it's a Thursday game.
Yeah.
So I always put the Thursday, Friday ones first. Yeah.
Gotcha. I like Iowa at +2.5 over Nebraska. This is going into your territory, Who's.
Yeah.
And the reason is I like, first off, Iowa lost Cooper DeJean. I think that's what's influenced the spread a lot. He's been a huge special teams weapon for them, scoring a lot of their points defensively. He's done for the year. He's not coming back, which really hurts his NFL draft stock, which that very well may send him back to school for another year. But excellent defender, excellent special teams athlete, probably a guy that you could end up playing both ways if you had to. And this Iowa offense has been absolutely terrible. There's no doubt about it. Brian Ferentz will be fired at the end of the year. That's already been set in stone. They made that decision. So they're going to bring in a new offensive coordinator, but this is his last game. I'm not saying that you're going to see.
They will be playing the next week.
What last regular season game? You're right. You're right. They got a bowl game after that too. But I don't think. I think that this is an opportunity, and this is also a Friday game. I think this is an opportunity for Iowa to put a stamp and go into the Big Ten championship with a really good mentality. Now the other thing is, Iowa's won 8 of the last 10 against Nebraska, and the visitors covered 3 straight.
Interesting.
Iowa will be in Nebraska. That's probably the other thing that's influencing this line.
Yep, game is in Lincoln.
I think they win this one outright. Nebraska, while we've been shitting on the Iowa offense, Nebraska's offense hasn't been much better all year.
No,
and it's been a lot of the buying in.
What are they down to? Their third QB now is playing. Oh,
yeah, Chuba Purdy. Yep, he's playing. And it's a lot of the buying in. It's a lot of getting everybody on the system. Like we talked about, Matt Rule does that extensively. But, I don't see Nebraska. I can understand why they're favored. I just don't see them pulling it off, especially when you look at the last 3 they played. They have all been tight, but they haven't been against a defense like this with Michigan State, Maryland, and Wisconsin. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball well enough to score. I think that they're going to give up just enough, and Iowa comes out with the win.
Yeah, Nebraska is once again playing Scott Frost ball, where they're losing 1-possession games this year. You look at most of their losses are pretty close, but Iowa makes their living in winning these close games. So I waffled on this one, especially from a point of view where I need to challenge games. I don't have any faith in challenging against Iowa. And one thing I think some people might look at and say, well, Iowa's going to be looking ahead to the conference title game. This could be a letdown spot. I don't think this is a letdown spot because Iowa probably knows that the Big Ten title game is not going to go their way. And winning this game could give them a better bowl game based on overall record. So I have no faith in Nebraska scoring even 17 points. Like I think this game is probably like a 16-10 type game, 17-9, something like that. I think we're dealing with Iowa wins by less than a possession, but Nebraska doesn't get more than 13, 14 points.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nebraska is a school that has a really good academic standing.
They could. I mean, all the Big Ten is. If you look at the top 25 public universities, like the 13 Big Ten publics are all typically on the list. They're all very good academic schools.
So in other words, they don't need to win a bowl game. They don't need to win another game to potentially get in a bowl game at 5-7. Because they could definitely get in on an academic waiver.
They will have a shot. The other thing that will help them a ton is they're one of the best traveling schools for away games in the country. Any bowl game is going to look at that. Oh, God, if Nebraska plays, we'll get 30,000 fans coming to that game. They're very appealing in that sense. So they certainly could get into a bowl game without winning. Yes, they'll be a sought-after 5-7 team if it comes to that. So I'm not challenging it. Long story short. Yeah.
Fair enough. You like Auburn at plus 14.5 over Alabama?
I do. I just talked about the letdown spots, so to speak. This is the classic letdown spot. I don't at all think Auburn wins this game, but I think they have a very good chance to cover this one. Alabama is totally going to be looking ahead at the SEC championship game. I don't care that Auburn lost last week. Freeze was out recruiting most of the week. Auburn last week was looking ahead to this game last week, and that's, I think, part of why they lost. But Alabama's not going to do anything. They're not going to try anything. They're going to keep it vanilla. It's going to be close to the vest. And I wouldn't have picked this game if I was hitting it down the fairway, if we were closer, if I was winning in GE probably. but I got to take a shot on this one. And I like Auburn. If you're giving me 2 touchdowns and a hook, I am worried that Bama blows the doors off of them in the second half, like they've done to some teams this year. Freeze will have wrinkles and they'll throw some kinks early on, I think. My fear is that it's like a 3 or 4 point game at halftime. Then they lose by 30, especially if Auburn starts turning the ball over a ton. But that big second half by Bama is my worry. But Bama still has every preseason goal Alabama had, they can still accomplish that. And this game is Auburn's Super Bowl. And I think they catch him in a look-ahead spot where Alabama wins, but it's by less than 2 touchdowns and a field goal.
I think that you've got a bunch of good points here. The home team is 9-2 straight up, 9-1-1 against the spread in their last 11 meetings.
Games at Jordan-Hare, for those of you that don't know. Auburn is the home team here. Yeah.
Yep. Tigers have also covered 7 of the last 9 meetings at Jordan-Hare. If you go back,
I will say part of that probably is if you're talking about that with the lines there, we always have the Bama tax. Bama gets bigger lines than they probably should some of these games. So
no doubt. But so they had a 20-point spread when they went into Jordan-Hare in 21. That was a 4 overtime game. I forgot
about that. Yeah,
they had a 3-point spread when they went there in 19, and Auburn upset them by a field goal.
Okay.
So the last couple times that they've been there, things have really come down to the wire for Alabama. This is a huge game for Auburn. I'm not challenging it. I'm agreeing with you. I like 14.5. I like the historical implications. Now, granted, this could turn into a blowout. We've definitely seen that happen before. I think
certainly could. Yeah.
I think the time before last, if I remember correctly, where they were there, maybe I'm thinking of 2018, but it was supposed we were all anticipating a tight game, even though the spread was 24 and Bama covered it. But that was in Alabama. This is a really tough place to go into and play.
Was that Gus's last year there?
Yes.
Like 3 years ago? Yeah.
Yep.
It might have been. That's what I thought.
Now, the other thing, too, is we know that Hugh Freeze can coach against Saban because he's the only coach, active head coach, to beat Saban in back-to-back meetings when he did it at Ole Miss 14-15.
Okay.
So,
that was actually another fact I came on that made me pick this game. Hugh Freeze historically is great as a double-digit spread underdog. And like as over 10-point underdog, his teams are fantastic. They cover all the time.
Yep. So I'm right there with you. I see it. I see it. I think that this is probably a much closer game than the sports books are anticipating, and I like Auburn there too.
Okay.
Going to my round 2 here, I like Louisville minus 6.5 over Kentucky. And this is one of those, what's a good way to put this? This is one of those rivalry games.
Yep.
This is hate week in Kentucky. Both these schools absolutely hate each other with a passion. I got a friend of mine that's now he's a coworker. He's doing some stuff over here for radio with us. He's a big Kentucky fan. He's going to kill me for this. But I absolutely I think that Louisville right now is playing at another level. And I rode with them last week with the Miami game. I liked what they had against Miami. This defense is, while they gave up some points last week, they're playing really well. Ashton Gelati is an absolute game wrecker. They've got some guys in the back end that are playing well. The linebackers are doing their job for the most part. UK, the interesting thing here is I have historical implications that are somewhat against me. UK has won 3 straight trips to Louisville. And the last 2 were by 31 and 46 points. Now, these were totally different Louisville teams. We're talking about, different Louisville teams, different Kentucky teams. We're talking about Will Levis at the prime, I guess you could say, of his college career, coming in there and winning by 36 and or 31.
Louisville's different this year, though. You're right about that.
Louisville's on a whole nother level. The visitor is 10-3-1 against the spread, so it's very possible. I understand that Kentucky has a good chance to cover historically.
Yeah.
Kentucky just hasn't shown me anything the last couple weeks. That South Carolina game was piss poor.
It was.
That was a road game as well, tough environment. Louisville's right now is selling out and packing those stands at another level. That's become a tough place to go into and play this year, as Notre Dame discovered firsthand. I like Louisville to cover 6.5, even in a rivalry game that they play every year.
Okay. What's the saying? The faint heart never caught the fair lady. So I am double challenging this one and going with the Wildcats. Yeah. I got to make plays here. Some of the sharps are on Kentucky. I like Ray Davis's ability to move the ball in this game, and for Leary to do just enough to keep that front honest. I'm very worried about Louisville's ability to get big plays. Kentucky's D-backs have been giving up big pass plays. So that does worry me. Thrash being injured, dinged up, could help me as well. I don't know his status. I assume he'll play, probably won't be 100%. Louisville's also going to be back to the looking ahead spot. I don't think Louisville really looks ahead as much as other teams might this week, but they're still going to have Florida State in the back of their mind that they're playing in the ACC title next week. We already know that regardless of this game. But based on Kentucky's ability to run the ball, some injuries we might have with Louisville, and how they've done on the road in this rivalry game, I think it's one of those I got to take a shot and put 10 points on the Cats here in Stoops.
Okay, fair enough. Now, it is interesting because while you mentioned all these different things, Florida State does not have Jordan Travis.
Yep.
As he's out for the year. That was an absolute tragic incident that happened in that game against North Alabama, which is ironically 45 minutes, not even away from where I live.
Is that Huntsville or where is that?
Florence.
Okay.
Florence.
Okay.
Yep. That's west of Huntsville, due west.
Yep, gotcha.
And Florence is strictly a college town at this point. But absolute tragic injury. That ends a fantastic college career, especially in the growth that Travis saw over his entire career. We definitely wish him the best, especially as he tries to put together his NFL dreams.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think if you're Louisville, that he's not going to play. There's not a lot of experience, a quarterback behind him. Maybe that allows you to focus on this game a little bit more,
certainly,
and focus on next week.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
So you like Virginia Tech -3 over Virginia as we get into the third round?
I do. This game is two teams who were absolutely terrible last year, terrible to start this year, and both are actually showing signs of life right now. They're both doing better than we have seen them most of the year. Virginia Tech, they did lose to NC State last week in a close one. Before that, they beat Boston College, got trounced by Louisville. Then they won 2 conference games before that in Syracuse and Wake Forest. I also feel like Virginia Tech is hugely motivated this week because they're on 5 wins. They want to get to bowl eligibility really bad. And they're going to, really need to get a W. Kyron Drones has never been great at throwing the ball, is at least not turning it over as much lately and is making some throws. Tutton's been running all right, and they're moving the ball on the ground better, and their defense has really been improved lately. Virginia, on the other hand, who I was ready to write off, and I thought they'd lose double-digit games, they will not lose more than 9 this year. Got a big win against Duke last week.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, they were another victim of Louisville. Got trounced by Georgia Tech. Just everything went wrong for them that game. They lost to Miami in a tight one on the road in overtime. And then they beat UNC in another big one. So both of these teams are showing signs of life. But I like Virginia Tech's ability to run the ball and being more consistent on defense to cover in a small spread like this. If this spread was any bigger, I wouldn't have picked them. I'll take them to cover by a field goal.
I'm thinking about it because it's, first off, until very recent, well, really, recently, Virginia Tech's dominated this.
Yep, they have.
They've dominated this series. It wasn't until I think Virginia Tech blew one in 2019. They lost by 9. That was the first time that I think Virginia had beat them in 16 games.
Because I remember that was a big game. I remember Mendenhall and his staff made a big deal. I think that was when Bronco Mendenhall got there from BYU.
Yeah, that was a huge game. And this is the first time Tony Elliott's in this matchup. This game was canceled last year due to the shooting at Virginia. That was absolutely just still tragic to this point.
Brent Pry as well.
3 Virginia players were killed by a former.
Yeah. Both second-year coaches, so this is also Pry's.
Yeah, Brent Pry.
That's a good point. I did not think of that at all, that it's these coaches' first time in the rivalry. Good call.
Yeah, so it's absolutely clean slate at this point. Neither one of these staffs have seen each other. It's going to be, first off, I think it's going to be tight. So I like the -3 spread. When I look at Virginia and the way that they've played here recently, like you mentioned, the win over North Carolina, close one in Miami goes into overtime, close one against Louisville on a Thursday night, upsetting Duke. Virginia's kind of figured out their game. And part of the reason for that is their rookie quarterback that's had to come in here, the freshman Anthony Calandria.
Yep.
And he is a gamer. Bro, watching him against Louisville. Oh my goodness.
I was surprised. So a lot of times during the week I'll listen to like coaches press conferences for that week while I'm doing work. And Tony Elliott basically came out and said that they're going to get a portal QB this offseason. It surprised me a little in a sense that you risk losing Calandria if you do that. Maybe you can get him to coexist and say, hey, he's just coming in here to see what happens, not taking your job away. But to me, that's a risk if you're Elliott to say that this early.
Yeah, and Calandria, he's a gamer. He's a baller. I absolutely loved what I saw from him. And so I think that he is the X factor here.
Okay.
And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to challenge it.
Okay.
I'm going to challenge it because I think Virginia could win this game outright. And I think that they've got the X factor. You talked about Virginia Tech's defense. They've been playing pretty well. 22 they gave up to Boston College, 35 to North Carolina State. Virginia's kind of in that same margin. It's going to come down to who's got the ball last. And in that situation, I put my trust in Calandria. So I'm going to challenge that.
Okay.
My round 3, I like MTSU at -3.5 over Sam Houston. So there is some motivation. This is one of these motivation games you've been talking about. MTSU right now has 4 wins on the year.
Yeah.
However, most of the Conference USA has 4 wins.
They do.
Which means, in theory, if they need to fill a Conference USA or Group of 5 spot, they might have to start calling 5 and 7 Conference USA teams. MTSU needs to win this. Sam Houston on the other side, and they've been bad. They're not eligible anyways, even if they had won enough games. First year in the FBS. They have started to kind of figure it out here at the end of the year. They beat their soon-to-be conference opponent, Kennesaw State, who will be joining Conference USA next year. And they also went on the road and beat Louisiana Tech, played a tough one against Western Kentucky, who's had a down year. We thought they were going to be a whole lot better than they were.
Louisiana Tech, who fired most of their defensive coaching staff a couple days ago.
Yep. FIU was a tight one. UTEP was a tight one. But MTSU's been in some tight ones lately, but they seem to have figured it out here toward the end of the season as well. They've got a very explosive offense. This game is going to be on the road. It is their first trip out there. MTSU has won 3 straight road finales. And last year was Middle Tennessee's first winning record on the road since 2016. This year, They have not won a road game yet. I think that they're going to finish that off right here, get their one, and take care of business.
Yeah, I don't have enough faith in Sam Houston to challenge this one. As much as I'm down, I'm in need to make plays. I almost view like if I was challenging this one, that's like burning up money, so to speak. Casey Keeler's a heck of a coach. I believe he's the only coach to win national titles at multiple FCS schools because he won one at Delaware before. And then Sam Houston State in the COVID year won the spring FCS national title.
Yes,
when they
and
played
that
that
was
season
a phenomenal year too.
But you look at their game, like, oh, they've had a lot of close losses and whatnot. They've lost close games to teams that are just god awful too. Like their losses aren't even to good teams, most of them, other than Liberty. They actually played Liberty really tight. But this Middle Tennessee team, the motivation's there, like you said. I also trust Stock still to get them ready for pretty much every game. He's a veteran coach. He's as seasoned as they come. And they'll miss him when he's gone. But I'm not challenging that one. Yeah.
Absolutely fair.
Yeah.
And keeping it in Conference USA, as we get to round 4, you like Jacksonville State plus 2.5 over New Mexico State.
I do. When we met in August for week 1, I 100% knew we would be here week 13 with the 8-3 Jacksonville State playing a 9-3 New Mexico State up here the whole way. Yeah, knew that was going to happen. Whoever thought these two teams would do this,
right?
But they both have really good coaches, so maybe that's why. But New Mexico State coming off of maybe the biggest win in program history. I don't think it's unfair to say that going to Auburn and win 38-10 is massive. For Jacksonville State, like we said, they are 8-3, but there is motivation for them because one of the teams that just moved up along with JMU, they're not guaranteed a bowl game. Mm-hmm. Being 9-3 could look a lot better for them if they're trying to scrape through and get one of those bowl game slots that's not filled by a 6-win team. They also run the ball extremely well. They're out of all 133 teams, Jacksonville State's going at the fastest rate of anybody. So they're moving, they're going no huddle, and they're running the ball a ton while doing it. And I think Rich Rod gets them really motivated for that game. New Mexico State, I don't know how you can't have somewhat of a letdown after the massive win you're coming off of. I mean, it's so everybody was talking about it. Jerry Kill's a fantastic coach, but I think a more motivated Jacksonville State gets it done in this game, even though it is on the road.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is a very interesting one.
Yeah, no. So New Mexico State's won their last 6 on Senior Day, which they are at home. This is Senior Day for them. When you look at the matchups that they had in those games in the last 5, Alcorn State in 2018, UTEP in 2019, 21 Dixie State, that was the spring, the regular season 21 UMass, and then last year Valparaiso.
Dixie State, now known as Utah Tech.
Yep. Thank you.
One of those randos
had to change it.
Yeah.
Had to with all the Dixie implications currently.
Which one of those wild ones that like everybody talks about, like, well, are we going overly PC? And they changed the name because of like the Dixie connotations to the American South. Nah, the guys that moved to Utah did actually name it after that, so there was an absolute connotation there because I looked it up afterwards. Yeah,
which is weird when you think about it, because it's like what, Dixie's nowhere near Utah. Like I don't know what y'all are thinking.
They specifically moved to that town. So, it had to do with irrigation and farming. Why they picked that location to move to, though. So yeah.
So Gamecocks have also won their last 3 straight road finales. when you look at the opponents that they played in that span, Central Arkansas, very good team at that level. Lamar, pretty good team. And Murray State in 2020.
Good FCS team. Usually decent FCS team. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're used to playing good opponents. They played up extremely well, way better than any of us expected. Their 3 losses are to Coastal Carolina, Liberty, and South Carolina. They've been phenomenal. Yeah. On the road this year in conference, 41-16 win over FIU, 45-30 win over MTSU, 35-28 win over Sam Houston. So they've had no issues with traveling. So that being said, I can't challenge this. I actually kind of like it too. So I'm going to let that one slide. I think that Jacksonville State can absolutely do it. You talked about the running game. The running game has really been successful because of Zion Webb at quarterback, being the running threat that he is as well. He's really helped open that up a lot. This is going to be a little bit of a different attack than New Mexico State's seen. This is also New Mexico State's 13th game this year. And they have a conference championship next week against Liberty that I'm sure they'll be looking ahead to. Yeah. So I agree. I like Jacksonville State here.
Nice.
Round 4, I went with Kansas minus 6.5 over Cincinnati. And if you want to talk about Coach of the Year candidates, Lance Leipold at Kansas absolutely should be in the running.
Yeah.
He's had himself a phenomenal year, and it's. When you look at the fact that they're not ranked anymore, they took that loss, a real close one to Kansas State last week. They're now 7-4 on the year. The fact that
lost their last 2.
Yeah, they've lost their last 2 because they've been down to their third-string quarterback, and they've still been extremely competitive. That says a lot about how you get your team prepared every week. Mm-hmm. And Lance, one of the best at it, one of the best program builders, chances are he very well may not be at Kansas next year, especially with all the head coach openings that are already starting to pile up across Power 5 football.
Don't let Thor hear you say that. People are already kind of
wondering if
Thor wouldn't be happy to hear you say that.
Oh no! We're gonna get group text tonight. Yeah. With a video, some sort of cut up video.
Yes.
He's a
big Jayhawk guy.
Both prior meetings.
He wants to keep Leipold there forever. Why wouldn't you? Yeah.
No, he's turned that program around on the football. They were terrible, and now they're extremely competitive.
Yeah.
As for Cincinnati, not a whole lot to play for.
Yeah.
4-7 coming into the game. Struggled here in the last few games. They got past Houston, but Oklahoma State blowout, Iowa State blowout, West Virginia blowout. Iowa State was at home, which is kind of crazy when you think about that. So weather's not going to be an issue for Kansas going to Cincinnati. I like them to cover 6.5 and probably do it by more than that. Most of the losses that they've had in conference this year, Cincinnati that is, have been by double digits. So I like the Jayhawks to come in here and wrap up business with a good touchdown plus win.
Okay. No, I think both of these teams are kind of backpedaling at this point. Kansas can't keep a healthy QB. Jalen Daniels has the nerve problem. Already announced he's coming back next year. Jason Bean then went in and was dinged up. So Kansas is now playing Cole Ballard, who son of Chris Ballard, GM. And
did not know that. That's a good tip.
Yeah. Yep, sure is. I didn't know it either until I found that out not too long ago, but they've lost 3 of their last 5, had all tight games. And in fact, the 2 wins and the 3 losses all close. The Jayhawks have been in every game, which I think speaks to Leipold getting them ready to play every game. Cincinnati, kind of a train wreck in their first year in the conference. Emory Jones hasn't been what we thought he would be. Disappointing year for Satterfield, who I think is a decent coach. He's had some down years, but it did all right. Did well at Appalachian State. Louisville was kind of topsy-turvy. I'm going to challenge this one for the sake of trying to make a play here, and going to play on that. All of Kansas's games have been close. I'm going to hope Cincinnati can keep it within a touchdown, even if they lose. 100% would not challenge this game if I didn't need 5 points. We'll just throw that out there. But some of the sharps are also on Cincinnati in this one. Certainly not all of them. It is a polarizing game if you look at the gambling trends. But the game's at home. I don't know how much of a home field advantage it makes, to be honest. But I'm hoping Cincinnati can run the ball with some effectiveness and that Emory Jones doesn't throw picks. And conversely, hoping that Cincinnati figures out Cole Ballard, the third string QB, and can force him into mistakes.
I'll give you another interesting tidbit here. So, out of conference opponents, they've won every game by 7 or more points. In conference opponents in their first year in the Big 12, 11-point win over UCF. BYU.
Okay.
And a 29-point win over UCF.
20.
So yeah, so
okay.
the two games that they've been
that's
basically
right.
every game
22 or something. Yeah.
Every game they've played outside of conference or with new opponents, they've handled by a touchdown or more.
Okay.
So that was one of the trends I went with on that.
That's a good one. Yeah.
You round 5, getting to the final round here. We're going to the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Washington State plus 17.5 over Washington. You're going with Wazoo.
Yeah, I am. Again, this is one of those games where you'll notice a trend. I am not thinking that Wazoo will win this game. Mm-hmm. But if you're giving me 2 touchdowns and a hook, I will go with Wazoo, who played their best game in several months last week against Colorado. And this is a absolute classic look-ahead game for Washington. They're going to do just enough to win, but not more. They're not going to show anything. They're not going to give Oregon anything, presumably Oregon, for that conference title game. Washington State is another team that's going to be hugely motivated. They're a 5-win team going for bowl eligibility in this week. And one other thing looked into, talked with, someone who brought this up, Washington on defense runs almost exclusively quarters coverage in the back and is keeping their front 7 close. That's also the defense Cam Ward has been the best against in his college career. So I'm hoping
deep down in there to find that one.
Yeah. I can't take all the credit for it, but finding out Washington did that was told to me. I'm like, oh, it makes sense why Cam Ward has success against it based on the out patterns and things they do with their slot receivers. And how they motion those guys across and a lot, things like that. But I like Washington to win this game, but I like Wazoo to cover. I think the motivation's there, the opportunity to throw your middle fingers up in the last meeting. We don't know if these teams are going to play, when the next Apple Cup's going to be after this year. And Washington has their eyes on a bigger prize, which is still the playoffs for them. And I don't think they show much. I think they play this vanilla. They do just enough to win, but I like Wazoo to cover this. Maybe a 35-21 type game, something like that.
No, that's fair. And Washington's won 11 of the last 13 Apple Cups. Straight up.
Jesus.
In that
it was that many. God.
In that span, they're 10-3 against the spread. However, the spread is usually by a single digit, not a 2 touchdown and field goal advantage where you really need to win by 3 touchdowns to cover this thing. I'm right there with you. I think that Washington State's going to throw the absolute sink at them. They need a win for bowl eligibility as well.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of Pac-12 openings really when you look at the big overall picture and go, where could a 5-7 team fit into a bowl game somewhere? Not a lot of opportunities, especially if Colorado manages to win their last game, because that'll put them at 5-7 on the season too. So right? I think right. I got that,
Yes.
getting that right. Yeah. So when I look at this, I think that Washington State, they are going to throw everything that they have at them. Cam Ward is going to throw everything he's got, and yeah, I don't know if I don't think Washington State wins. There's a chance they might, but Washington is you hit the spot, the hammer on the nail. I agree with you.
Okay.
And then I went ahead and I saved this one for last because it's the biggest game. It's
Yeah.
literally called the game. I like Michigan at -3.5 over Ohio State, even without Jim Harbaugh. How do I put this? Is Ohio State really that great of a football team? I think
Maybe.
I
We don't
think
know.
in all the tight games that we've seen this year, their stiffest opponents, Notre Dame, Penn State, even Wisconsin, which is not that's traditionally not a tough opponent. Ohio State just has not been that impressive to me. And they've managed to get into the part of the schedule where they were able to kind of cruise through, and they got through it just fine. Michigan played a tough game last week against Maryland. Why do you think that was a tough game, Hughes? They're looking ahead.
I think they were looking ahead. Yeah.
Everybody, yeah, you looking ahead at this one. This is the game. You need to win this one to get into, the Big Ten championship.
Yeah.
You didn't need to win the Maryland game, to get into a Big Ten championship.
Yes.
Because if you lost to Maryland but go beat Ohio State, then you got the same conference record and you have the tiebreaker in the head-to-head matchup. So they were definitely looking ahead. I just have not been all that impressed with Ohio. Now, granted, Ohio State's defense is very good, but this is an offense that's much better than Notre Dame's. This is an offense that's much better than Penn State's. And I think that Michigan is going to have everything cooked up for them. Michigan is at home. They are the underdog. No, sorry.
They're the favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, Michigan's the favorite, and I can't see. The only way that I lose this is if Michigan wins by a field goal. I think that there's going to be some weird scoring type deals, and it's going to be somewhere between 4 and 7 that they win by, if not more.
Yeah. This is one that I think could go either way. I don't know what to make of it. I think Michigan's definitely the better team. They're running the ball with multiple guys all year. I'm not going to challenge this one. I also thought about picking this game on Michigan as well. Part of me in the last minute thought about making the challenge just for the sake of trying to get 5 points out there since I'm in the big deficit. But other than the Harbaugh thing, I think everything points toward Michigan being the right play in this one. And yeah, the winner of this game knows you win this one, you beat Iowa, you're going to the playoffs.
And yeah, you have to. Michigan's just been a better team all year to me.
I think they have been the best team in the country all year. Yeah, and I preseason thought they'd
Yeah, you did. You called that.
Yeah.
You called that preseason, absolutely. But I think Michigan they're good, man. I don't want to say that they're the best Michigan team that we've seen the last couple of years while they've been in playoff contention, but they're definitely right there with the rest of them. And
Certainly.
Maybe the rest of the competition starting to play. I still don't like Michigan matched up against Georgia if they have to go play them. I wouldn't like that matchup at all. I think that Georgia would still blow the brakes off of them because Georgia's just more physical. When you look at what Georgia does on Tuesdays, they call them Bloody Tuesdays. It's because it's literally best on best, be as physical as you possibly can. They preach that the entire year. And with everything going on with Michigan right now, too, I think if you end up against Georgia again, Georgia blows the brakes off of them. That's my opinion.
I don't know that it's
in this matchup. Ohio State just has not.
Yeah. Now you're right about what you were going to say with Ohio State.
Ohio State's just. Yeah, no, they just haven't been out. I mean, they've been able to ride that defense. They've been able to score points against lesser opponents, but that offense has been an absolute struggle bus. at the beginning of the year, and then when they played good teams.
I also think Ohio State's defense is way more set up to stop pass heavy teams, not run heavy teams like Michigan, where you can get your,
Yeah.
Michigan's going to get their O tackles, tight ends pushing downhill, and that's going to be to their benefit. So yeah, I'm with you on that one.
So here's a wrap up of the challenges. You started things off hot with your first challenge. You got me in a double Louisville -6.5 over Kentucky. I also challenged my Kansas -6.5 over Cincinnati. I have enjoyed. I've joined in with the fray. I've challenged you on Mississippi State +10.5 over Ole Miss and Virginia Tech -3 over Virginia. As we look ahead to this next week, Heisman candidate implications are real. Who needs to have an absolute performance to get back into the conversation or solidify it?
I think we're down to 3 guys now. I think
Okay.
Daniels, Nix, Penix are the only 3.
Yep.
Penix, I think, is less of a. How do I try? Oregon and LSU, I think their whole week and game this weekend is going to be about setting their guy up to win the Heisman. LSU has nothing to play for. They're going to try to get Daniels the Heisman. Oregon, I think, is in a game they think they'll probably win, but also they're going to do what they can to get Nix the Heisman. Washington hasn't been doing that as much the last few weeks. Maybe that's because they haven't been afforded to, because they've struggled some of those games to win, and they've had to pull out everything they can. If they finish undefeated and win win Saturday, win the conference title game, Penix might get the award. But I don't think that their team is having the mindset this Saturday that we've got to win this for him, like the other 2. But I don't see anyone but those 3 winning the award at this point. Do you?
No, because you're not going to give it to McCord if he wins the game. You're not going to give it to
Travis is out now.
Travis is out now. You're not going to give it to McCarthy.
No,
not after the last couple of games he's had.
No, you're not.
Yeah, and granted, it's not been so much that he's played bad the last 2 games. It's been they didn't need him. They ran the ball. So I think he has a great performance. He's going to come out and ball out against Ohio State. But that's not enough to rescue the last few weeks where it's clearly you're not the best player on your own team.
It's also interesting how in Harbaugh's absence, their run percentage goes up like 20%. Like they run way more when Jim's not in there.
That's going to change this week.
Yeah.
It
might have to. It might have to change this week. Yeah.
It's going to change in the game plan too, because if you look at the last 2 games that they played, Penn State, that offense is not going to come out and score points this year.
Yeah.
When you're going into that game, that they're not going to score. So you lean on the defense, you play ball control, you run the ball that way. That's what they did. That's how they win that game. Maryland, very vanilla game. Very vanilla game plan. They got the early lead on Maryland because of their defense, had 2 safeties in the game. One an intentional grounding in the end zone, the other the punter lost the snap, kicked it out of the back of the end zone. So when I take those couple things into consideration, I know that they've been planning and prepping for this game against Ohio State because they have to. The game, everything, all the trends that you've seen with Harbaugh out the window. Completely out the window.
Yeah. We talk about the Heisman. Let's shift gears for a few seconds. Nagurski Award, Defensive Player of the Year. They announced the 5 finalists over the weekend. We have Peyton Wilson, NC State, Xavier Watts, Notre Dame, Malachi Starks, Georgia, Jerzon Newton, Illinois, and Super Cooper from Iowa, who you had talked about before. If I was going to vote today, I'd probably say Watts gets the award, Notre Dame, but who do you think?
If Cooper didn't get hurt, that's where my vote would have gone.
Yeah.
I don't think the Nagurski's one that I vote on.
Okay.
The Bednark is. Maxwell is.
Nice. Okay, yeah.
but I don't think I'm on the Nagurski. But if I had a vote, it would if Cooper's not hurt, that's where it goes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I know that they haven't played well, but he's so impressive because he doesn't have the skill set that you typically see at the position. It's Drizon Newton at Illinois.
Newton's a stud D tackle. Yeah.
You know, and we talked a lot on my draft podcast on the Sick Podcast Network about him, which I'm getting ready to go tape here as soon as we're done.
Yeah.
But we talked a lot about him because he's not your typical professional defensive tackle prospect. Like, he's got the size, he's got the athletic ability, but you don't see a lot of the jolt in his hands. You don't see, you know, the typical power that you see at that position, but he still wins.
Okay.
And he's so consistent with it. He's I think when you look at his game log, very consistent up and down as a guy that impacts the passer, as a run defender, just knows how to get off a block. Very Geno Atkins-ish.
And playing against teams in a conference and division who are typically going to have good interior line.
Yes.
You're going to have good centers and guards that he's playing against.
Yeah, and that's why he's probably the first defensive tackle off the board come the NFL draft this April. But my vote probably goes to Newton.
Okay.
I would still be very close to putting Cooper in there because in the 10 games that he played this year, 10 and a half, very impactful player, incredibly.
No, I can't fault you with there.
I saw Cooper live too at the Music City Bowl this past year, and I wasn't, believe it or not, I wasn't tracking him going into that game, but I was watching him in warm-ups, and I'm sitting there watching him return, going back there catching kicks, as the kickers are warming up, and I'm sitting there going, he's kind of explosive. Like, who is this guy? And I'm looking him up, and I'm going, he's interesting. He's got a really good body type. Looks like a professional player. Okay. I'm like, okay, well, he's a true sophomore. That's why I'm not tracking him. And so I added him to it, and he had himself a hell of a game against Kentucky in the Music City Bowl last year. Absolutely popped in that
their
game.
Defense just dominated against Kentucky's backup QBs 21-0.
Yeah, absolute domination. Yeah. And they continued that this year. He's been really the X factor for them to get them to where they are right now, 9-2, potentially 10-2 at the end of the year in a Big Ten championship. And so from a defensive impact standpoint, he's the best defender in the country because of the sheer number of points he's been able to generate with his play and on both defense and special teams.
Yeah, he's good. A guy I was surprised didn't make that Final Five was Jared Verse. He's had a very impressive year at Florida State.
Yeah, his numbers haven't been as great.
That's true. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's probably, because a lot of media people that vote on those things, they look at numbers.
Like Watts, who I said might be my favorite right now, leads the country in interceptions at 7.
Right, so, right. And he's had himself a really good year. And, as a pro prospect, he's probably a day 2, early day 3 guy. Yeah. Whereas Newton's going day 1. If he doesn't get hurt and he's healthy and he's going into this draft, he's probably a day 1 guy. But I think that I would probably lean Newton, but I would still have a really hard time putting Newton in front of Cooper.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Anything else we need to tackle before we wrap this up today?
No, I don't think I do have anything else.
Good deal.
We covered it pretty well.
Yep. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. State semifinals for me on Friday night, so
good luck. Yeah, good luck.
Got a 3.5-hour drive. I'm going to miss a lot of football on Friday. Because we got the 8 Pete Nash. We got the 8 Pete state champions coming in. Yeah. We're going to their place.
Good luck.
Huge game. I think we got a really good shot to win it, Hughes. So we're going to see what we can do.
I hope you do. Yeah.
But until next week, for Mike Hughesman, I'm John Vogel. Thanks for tuning in, watching our show. This is Gridiron Eve. We're going to talk about conference championships next week, and then we'll have a couple episodes definitely for bowl games throughout the month of December. We got to give Mike a chance to come back into this.
Yep.
Down 50, 25 points on the line this week. Yet again, just like last week, Just not trying to rub it in or anything, but I'm
No,
8-0 in the last
I
2
don't blame
weeks.
you. I don't blame you.
8-0 in the last 2 weeks, right here in challenges. So,
Yeah.
but for Mike Huseman, I'm John Vogel. Thanks for watching. We'll be back at it next week right here.